this is actually it's another historical sort of fact, why, Genghis Khan and the Mongol horde, who were, carnivores, they were completely meat based. They ate horse meat, they drank horse blood, and they were on average 6'4" on average. Adult male was 6'4". I'm 6'3", so I'd be below average for, the little, we think like, Mongolians as little Asian dudes, but no, they were very large men on very small horses, and they just ate horse meat. And
were they sort of farming the horses? Like they're riding the horses, but then they've also got this kind of like flock of horses as well.
Yeah, I mean, these things are just breeding all the time. I'm sure they had surpluses as well. I'm sure that, they had certain ones bred for eating, riding and so forth, that maybe, they probably didn't eat, but they also did bloodletting as well. So if they were on like a long journey or whatever, they would actually, let blood from the horse, and they'd put it in a container or whatever, and they would drink it. Amazing. And so that they would drink horse blood as well. And so this was why they could go. So the Mongols had the largest contiguous empire that's ever existed. And it's actually where Russia is now. That's part of the old Mongol Empire, because actually, when there was a cataclysm of some form, we don't know exactly what, but maybe a volcano, maybe an asteroid, something hit, blew up a big bunch of dust and plume into the atmosphere for several years. This blocked out the UV. This blocked out the sun's energy and rays, and killed a lot of the vegetation, killed a lot of the grasses. And tons of animals died as well. This is, for some reason, what Bill Gates is trying to do. He just did an experiment, I think in Sweden, where they shot up a bunch of particulates to try to block out the dangerous energy from the sun. It's like, buddy, we only exist because of the energy.
It needs to stop interfering and let nature
that's
do it.
It's the you have a complex system, and you mess with it, you are going to have, it's a law of unintended results. You mess with a complex system, you have no way of predicting.
It's so dumb. It's like introducing the cane toads to kill the locusts, which is what we did here in Australia. And now I've got this like cane toad swarm that in 2022 we can't control. Look, block out the sun, it's going to be a worse outcome than just cane toads.
That's it. The cure is worse than the disease. Oh, man. But this one's not too hard to figure out. I mean, the guy's smart enough. Bill Gates is not a dumb man. And we literally made, I think Highlander 2 was actually about this. It was like in the future, and there was like, the danger from the sun, and we had to block it out to block out the UV light. And then it was just like, it was horrible. It was just all dark, and it was rainy. It was terrible. And it was this horrible landscape. They're like, oh, we really messed up. It's like, the Matrix is like that. They scorched the sun, they scorched the sky so that the sun's energy couldn't come in. And then, they had to farm people and so forth. So this is bad. This comes out bad. All the major extinctions that we know about are generally from one of these cataclysmic events where the sun's energy gets blocked out, and it just destroys life on Earth, just completely destroys it. And you have these mass extinctions. Every single one of these things causes a mass extinction. And he's literally trying to do this intentionally, which is crazy to me. And I mean, that's like Bond villain level crazy.
Yeah.
And so something like that happened to the Mongol horde. And so something hit about that time, kicked up a bunch of dust, and for years it killed off a lot of the grasses and a lot of the vegetation. And because horses were much less efficient at getting the energy from grasses, they need a lot more grasses. They weren't able to survive, and so they weren't able to maintain their herds, and their empire died out, or at least regressed significantly into what is now modern day Mongolia. This is where Russia came from, because they had basically their slave population there, or at least underclass population, were herding cows, and they were cow-based society. And so they actually were able to survive and thrive because of the cows, and because the cows were much more efficient at it. And so they ended up taking over. That's where Russia is now, because that's a big chunk of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire stretched from nearly the Atlantic Ocean in France and to nearly all of Asia. Is absolutely massive. You look at it on a map sometime, it is massive. It's the largest it's the largest empire that has ever existed. Pure carnivores. People say it's like, you can't have a civilization without agriculture, without farming and so forth. Largest civilization that's ever existed on Earth was purely carnivorous, and it was 900 years ago. And you look at the Native Americans in North America, they were just eating meat. They were just eating, predominantly buffalo. They had cities in St. Louis, what is now St. Louis. They found, obviously abandoned because there was some plague that killed off like 95% of the Native Americans in the sort of early to mid 1600s, just before the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock, and I think it was at 1642 or 1646 or something like that. Anyway, there was some sort of mass extinction of the Native Americans just before that, and all of a sudden people started kind of going west a bit, like, what's going on? What's going on? There's no one here. What's going on? And they started going out and exploring, and they found settlements. They found cities that were just gone. There was no one there. In St. Louis, they found buildings and structures and all these sorts of things that they estimated could house 1 million full-time residents. Wow. In St. Louis. And they had, 5 different massive trade routes that were just beaten into the ground because there's so much traffic going up and down, up to the Great Lakes, out to, out west, down, south and east, and all these sorts of things, major trade routes. And they all came here. And even years, even decades after no one had used these things, they were still beaten into the ground because they're so highly trafficked. But 1 million people, full-time residents in what is now St. Louis, fully carnivore. So get back to horses. They just aren't as efficient. But that, that's some interesting tie-ins with historical carnivores as well.
It is a good reminder about how efficient and amazing cows are, because they can survive in really hardy environments. You could have a cow living on a nature strip in between a highway. And I think that's something that's totally been forgotten, that, in an ideal society, you really could have cows everywhere, and the cows are providing you with meat and they're providing you with milk, and they're living off what, we might consider scrub or weeds or whatever. And then they're producing something that's highly, highly nutritious, perfect food for humans. And you don't have to store it when it's on their body. They're just walking around doing their thing.
Yeah. And, and the thing is too, they can survive on more than that. When I was in Bangladesh, doing humanitarian work in the refugee camps there, we saw cows that were sort of all over the place because, they did eat meat there. It wasn't like India where most people are vegetarian. They ate a lot of meat there, and when they could get it, they were very, very poor. But there were cows. You see cows around. These things did not eat grass. These things, I called them trash cows because they were literally eating trash. I thought because they didn't have any trash removal services in Bangladesh, so they just throw trash on the sidewalk. They just throw trash on the ground. And a lot of the stuff was, processed food, had like Ruffles chips and things like that, which is crazy. I mean, these people are dirt poor, and yet these predatory food companies are coming in and saying, oh, here, buy our chips. It's like, the food that they can just get locally is going to be a hell of a lot less expensive and a hell of a lot more nutritious. Like you guys are really taking advantage of people who are really, really, really not well off. And I think that that's a pretty nasty practice. But in any case, they do buy this and they have a lot of this stuff there. And so they have a lot of plastic bags. You go through places, there's just jungles. It's just jungles in these little villages, and this road that goes through a central market. And everyone's just milling around, and these little stores that are like built out of like bamboo and so forth. And they just have stacks of hanging plastic bags of treats and things like that in the middle of the jungle. It's surreal. And so they throw this stuff out because they don't have anywhere to dispose of it properly, because they never used this stuff before. Everything that they had before would biodegrade, or they'd use for fuel to burn, and this stuff they couldn't. So they just throw it on the ground. And I thought that the cows were sort of eating in the trash. I thought they were sort of moving it out of the way to get to the like little nubbins of grass that were underneath it. So I'm like, okay, but it didn't really look around. I'm like, okay. Then when we were going through this little area, there was a bin, sort of a large concrete container. There were 20 cows all in this thing, just eating the trash. There was no grass. There was concrete floor. And this is where people would throw all their trash. There's 15, 20 cows all in there just eating the trash and trying to get this hyper palatable food and little leavings. And I was like, that is crazy. So we call them trash cows. I took a ton of pictures of these things. I should probably put them up on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I might have put some of them on Instagram. Some of my Bangladesh pictures that's why I started Instagram, was just people kept asking me about my trip to Bangladesh. So I put some of the pictures, some of the more easily digestible ones, because some of these things are really, really tragic that you just wouldn't want to see. But I think I would have put the trash cows up. If not, I will. Yeah. And so they can eat trash and do just fine. And then, but you're right. They don't have to be in a field. You don't have to clear a field and just grow grass. They evolved in these big grassy fields, and that's actually what made them very, fertile and so forth. These big grassy plains that came through, North America and so forth.
Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door. Something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
But you don't need to. You can run them through rangeland. You can run them through forest, which is the predominant type of land that we have on Earth. There's only 4% of the Earth's surface, including the oceans, obviously, is arable land where you can have a farm or a city, because that's the thing. Farms and cities compete for space, and only 4% of the world's surface is arable land. But I think forest is like 10 or 15%, and then rangeland is like 10 or 15%. One of them is 10, one of them is 15%. I forget which one's which, but these are things. So that's 25% of the Earth's surface, roughly, that is not suitable for cities, not suitable for farms, is suitable for cows, suitable for goats, is suitable for sheep.
Well, I think the biggest farm in the world is in Australia. I think it's like owned by the Kidman family. And it's like as big as a state. There's like millions of square kilometers. And the cows roam, and you see footage of them, and they're in the desert. And you think, well, what are they eating? But they're crossing a lot of land, and they're finding little shrubs and all sorts of things to eat. And and when you see the Maasai with their cows in Africa, in Tanzania and Kenya, there's not like open plains of just perfect green grass. It's it's an arduous environment, yet these cows are still able to find the nutrients they need.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what people like Alan Savory has been doing, where he's taking large herds of animal out through Zimbabwe and around the world, because he's been doing this for 40 years. And I saw some clown vegan activist doctor guy who I think is just very, very misinformed of his own volition. I think he works very, very hard to be as misinformed as possible to fit his ideology. But he was talking about Alan Savory, and this guy makes these big claims and then doesn't back them up. He just states the statement like it's irrefutable proof. But he was basically making a statement that Savory was doing that, saying that people that have Galileo syndrome, where they just think they just know everything and no one else does, and they've got the answer to everything. They compare themselves to Galileo and so forth, and they make these grandiose proclamations, such as that's appropriate livestock farming and management can reverse global warming. And so he says that Alan Savory has Galileo syndrome. Well, I mean, first of all, you have to show me where exactly he said those words specifically, Chief. And second of all, show me why he's wrong. Okay, because first of all, I've never heard Alan Savory say that, but he's been doing this for 40 years, and he's been getting reproducible results from himself and from other people who learn his techniques. They do the exact same things. You have the exact same things happen. When you have that reproducibility in a study or a trial or in practice, you know that you're onto something. Okay. So what Savory is doing is he's taking large herds of animal like you would see in the wild, bunched and moving, So they're not just sitting there just eating down the grass to nothing. They're just eating it down most of the way, and then they move on because they're defecating and urinating on their food source. And so they have to keep moving, and to find palatable bits of grass and so forth. So they have to keep moving. This is very beneficial to the soil. This is very beneficial to the grasses and the plants, as it turns out. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think people should, I'd encourage them to go watch Alan Savory's work and Peter Ballerstedt's work. That guy's brilliant. He's a PhD in forest agronomy. He does a lot of work in this area. There's a lot of very interesting, hard science, fact-based talks on this exact subject. When the ice ages hit, and this killed off a lot of the plants, and killed off a lot of the animals that ate the plants. Only the big woolly mammoths and bison and so forth, their predecessors, were able to dig under the permafrost and get at the grasses and so forth. These things were able to survive. And then the big predators that hunted them, including our ancestors. And if our ancestors weren't adapted to hunting these megafauna because they